Good to see you this morning, Graham. And just as Livia was touching upon there, 139 people charged so far. The government will be hoping that the mugshots on the front pages of all these newspapers in front of us and these sentences, speedy as they are, will be acting as a deterrent.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's been good to see policing and the justice system working so well together and so swiftly and quickly. And clearly those sentences have been advertised and published, etc. So I think it's probably had a bit of a chilling effect on some people. If you imagine if you go out tonight, tomorrow night or last night, and within a week you could find yourself not only in a police cell but in a court and facing a lengthy term of imprisonment, I think it will deter some people from coming out and committing offences.
Yeah, but what we are seeing is now the Prime Minister is saying, well, we've got to keep up the pressure. Well, actually, I mean, how long can the police carry on like this?
That is a good question. Clearly the resources we've got out in the streets at the moment and public order trained officers are not all police officers. So all police officers are not trained to this level of public order. So they've been taken away from 24/7, primarily response policing. So the officers that respond to 999 calls, who are also public order trained, have now been taken away from their stations to be on standby for any disorder. So I would imagine they'll keep these resources in place probably to the end of the weekend. Many forces are working, or their shifts are working 12-hour days to release some officers to provide this resilience. And I think they'll probably take it to the weekend. Then you might see a scaled down version next week, just to maintain it for a little bit longer. But I think this weekend will be the telling point to see if there's any more incidents of serious disorder across the country.
Because there is a concern amongst some police, isn't there, Graham? This front page of the Times this morning, the police are reportedly examining links between far-right extremists, as they call them, and football hooliganism, as, of course, the football season starts up again this weekend.
I worked football for most of my career, and I joined in the late 70s. So there's always been a link between some far right and some football risk groups, but that's not across football. If you go to any football clubs, and I used to go home and away with some policing them, it's a small minority that turn up that want to be involved in disorder. They're the ones that the police operation is largely focused on. The vast majority who go to football just want to go and watch the football and come home. But there have been links to some far-right groups within some football risk clubs and risk groups. And I think it's right that police should look at that and focus on maybe this weekend with the football season starting and just focusing their policing operation on some of those games and clubs.
What's your take on the two-tier policing argument, Graham, as a man who's obviously been in the job for a very long time? You're incredibly experienced. I mean, we've had different views from former officers on the show, some saying, you know, there is no two-tier policing, just things are policed differently. Others coming on and saying it's quite apparent that some people, you know, you have to walk on eggshells with some parts of the community, whilst on others you act in a robust manner.
I've heard that, Stephen, and I'd almost put it back to you. When you hear the phrase, is your interpretation of two-tier policing, to both of you, does it mean you think it's a favouritism or a preference? Because that seems to be the interpretation many people are putting on this. And I joined, as I said, late 70s. There are always sections of society we had to police slightly differently than others. And it wasn't based on skin colour. I can go through council estates, traveller sites, football risk groups who are predominantly white. So it's not based on either ethnicity, nationality or immigration status. It's based on the risk that those people face in policing. So it's based on the threat and risk they face to you when you're dealing with them. And in some areas and in some communities and with some people, you have to have a slightly different policing approach because, you know, if you go in slightly robustly, you're going to get a robust reaction to you. So for me, it's not based on a preference or a favouritism. There are different tiers or approaches in policing, but it's based on risk and threat. It's not based on any preference or favouritism for a particular group, nationality or ethnicity.
It's an interesting take. Do you think then, in terms of what we're seeing at the moment, because the problem is, and that's obviously a perfectly valid argument from your experience, the problem is it's the prism in which you look at it, isn't it? And at the moment, people are seeing sort of white Brits being treated robustly where non-white Brits are not, or not in the same way. Now, that might be perfectly justifiable. However, it's all about the optics, isn't it? And that has to be considered, doesn't it?
Absolutely, and you're right. It's all about the opposites. It's how it looks when you're seeing it. And if you're looking at one group being policed in a certain way and another group not, but I think as you just mentioned, there's at least one former councillor been arrested yesterday from what's been termed the counter protest. So I think policing is showing it is dealing with these in a balanced and fair manner when it can and when the offences arise and when the threat and risk is posed to them. We saw those protests last weekend, and there was significant disorder and violence put towards the police and premises by predominantly right wing. I wouldn't call them far right. I don't think half of those people have been near a far right event, but predominantly right wing supporters, anti-immigration supporters who came out on the street because they're looking at some of it false information on the internet. And I think that's an issue for policing as well. How much information is put on social media and people are reacting to it without finding out the full facts.
Well, interesting that you say that, Graham. So I just wanted to ask you what you thought of Sadiq Khan, London Mayor, talking about the online safety bill. And he basically says it's not fit for purpose because of what we've seen in the past week or so. Misinformation online, lots of people going onto the streets to take part in disorder, had seen misinformation, disinformation online, such as that this man that took part in the Southport attacks was a migrant who'd come over in a small boat last year. That kind of thing. Is that something that you'd agree with? And is that putting police officers in danger, this misinformation being spread online?
It is putting officers and the public and society in danger when misinformation is spread online. It's a new piece of legislation. With any piece of legislation, it needs to be tested through the courts. So there may be some updates, tweaks they can put on it. But at the moment, it's being tested through the courts. My understanding has been some people already arrested, possibly some charges pending. So it'll be the courts that will test the legislation and see whether it is fit for purpose. Initially, it looks like it's having an impact, but whether it's the right impact on the right level with the right people, I think needs to be tested in the courts once cases get before magistrates and judges and let them have a look at it, the legality of it, the offences, the points to prove the police have to meet, and where these individuals are posting this information. That might be a challenge for policing and investigation. But I think at the moment it needs to be tested in courts because it is new, and see if it does need updating, amending, or changing just to suit what the offences are being committed.